Hey, greetings and welcome to week one, lecture 3. I wanted to take a few moments today and talk to you a little bit about what I think is some of the unhealthy expectations or environments that are created for ministry in the 21st century. And to recognize the impact that these have on our longevity, because the next lecture we're going to talk about leadership and longevity. And because I think first we talked about spiritual formation, how important it is. Second, we talked about the nature of burnout and bitterness. Now we need to talk about some of the unhealthy environments. So the first environment that I want to speak about is this idea of success. So it's measuring our ministries by the metrics of this world rather than the significance of living into our calling as Christ followers. And I think our success is tied to our metrics and our measurements. So too often there's a pressure placed on ministers to show their success either in the numbers that they report, the number of people that come to their church, the amount of money that there's raised, or that success looks like notoriety. Do I have a brand? How significant am I? What does all this mean for me? And there's a pressure that comes because there's expectations that we place upon ourselves based upon our own insecurities. There's expectations that people place upon us, even in the sense that the way they talk to us, like God has got some major big things for you. And when people say that, we sort of internalize those things and we start to ask ourselves the question, if I'm not meeting the measurements of success, am I being what I'm supposed to be or doing what I'm supposed to do? And then we start living by competition and comparisons. And I think those types of issues associated with success can begin to sabotage our ministries. And we see this on a grand scale right now with what I call the collapse of the celebrity status or celebrity pastor status. And that is happening across the board right now. In fact, I'm going to attach a blog article to this lecture that I think is really helpful for us to work through maybe why some of this is happening. But I think it's really important for us to recognize that we've created the environment for this to take place. Nowhere in the world, even in the places where Christianity is exploding, where there are people being reached for Jesus and churches planted and thousands of people coming to faith, do we know the names of the successful leaders like we do in the West? Throughout the world, in places like China where the underground church exploded, we don't know the names of those leaders. Almost as if that's not necessarily that important. Almost like the status of those leaders isn't that important. And yet we have somehow in the West made it important. And so we have these celebrity pastors who write the books, hold the conferences that we point to. They're the exemplars of success. And they build these ministries around them that are huge and great and wonderful. And then someday, unbeknownst to everybody else, as the world has been eroding underneath the pedestal that we've put them on, they come collapsing down. There's a breach of integrity. There's a moral failure and whatever. And your skeptics and cynics are pointing at them going, yeah, we knew that was going to happen. Almost like they're glorying in the demise of someone. Or you have people going, oh my gosh, what happens? What's going to happen next? Because we've put so much importance on the person and the status of that person. And I think the collapse of the celebrity pastors, and we see this, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to rehash all of the different pastors that have been crippled by this throughout the years. And that's not to say that they don't bear any responsibility. I'm not trying to give them a get out of responsibility free card. What I'm saying is that they are the products of the environments and the culture that we've created and the kinds of ministries that we seek to affirm and point out as being successful. And we somehow begin to mark our ministries by the number of Twitter followers we have, or by the books that we publish, or the domain name that we take out in our name because we somehow feel like that we're that important. And I'm just wondering if that's what Jesus had in mind when he called us into ministry. In fact, John and James, two who had this tendency to make ministry about something that it wasn't, continually sort of fought for who was on the right and who was on the left, who was the greatest and who is the least. And Jesus continues to reverse that, turn that upside down and on its head. And I think we would do well for us as ministers to think about what is ministry significance really? Is it about our notoriety? Is it about our name? Is it about our success? Or is it about our lives lived for the sake of the gospel, poured out and empty in this kenotic, self-emptying posture, kenosis being a word associated with Philippians chapter 2, when it says Christ emptied himself? Is it this kenotic posture that we are to take, in which it's not about how much or who knows what we do, but simply about how faithfully we live and how consistently we do so? And so I think the collapse of the celebrity pastor in today's culture should point to the evidence that maybe what we've made ministry out to be isn't what it was intended to be from the get-go. So I think that's one of the environments and one of the cultures that we've created around pastoring that makes pastoring as a setup for maybe a collapse. I also think that the current political climate makes ministry very difficult. We already come into our congregations who have divided themselves amongst tribes, and that we feel the pressure to find ourselves located within one of those tribes in order to feel acceptable to our congregations. And so we pander to the political discourse, either through feeling the call to lean into republicanism or to lean into Democratic Party. And I think that in itself makes it difficult for us, because that pressure of being politically correct, that pressure of siding with the right side, that pressure to pander to our constituencies, and even though we wouldn't want to use that language, that's what it can sometimes feel like, I think sets us up for negative outcomes moving forward. That as pastors who are spiritually formed by the gospel, we're called to inhabit a third space, a third way of living, a way that somehow steps into this tension between these opposing forces and invites people back to the centrality of the kingdom and the centrality of the gospel. And sometimes, because we refuse to step into those tribal battles, we can feel lonely, we can feel disgruntled, we can allow our spiritual superiority and arrogance and self-righteousness over those groups to cause us to feel this tinge in us, and we start to wonder if the church is even worth it. So I think political discourse and I think the culture of success, that I think those two things are environments that lead to the demise of pastoring in today's culture. And then the third environment, as I think, is the irrelevance of the church. And this is something that I meet pastors experiencing over and over again. And that is that we give ourselves away to churches, to ministries that continue to lose people, lose funding, and we wonder, is this even worth it? We don't even know how to talk to our neighbors because we don't know our neighbors, because we're so busy. And if you were in my Christian neighboring class, we talked about this. We're so busy doing church work that we don't even know the people surrounding us that are disconnected from Jesus. And so we don't even know how to speak to those folks that are disconnected to Jesus because we're never in relationship with them. So we feel ill-equipped and ill-prepared for the season that is ahead of us, this season of uncertainty as the church marches into the 21st century. And I think there's a lot of overwhelming sense of like, maybe this isn't even, maybe I'll go do something else. And so I think it's the celebrity culture, the cult of personality that we've built around ministry. I think it's the political discourse, especially in the West, that we find ourselves enmeshed in. And I think it's this lack of a preparedness of knowing how to navigate the new season that is ahead of the church in the 21st century, in which people just don't clamor to our ministries because we open the doors and we preach really well. I think those three things set us up for some tensions and some struggles moving forward in ministry. And I think we've got to be aware of those three particular elements in ministry, because if we're not careful, these are the types of things that will cause us to call into question whether or not we even want to do this ministry thing any longer. And again, I'm not trying to make the assumption that we're all going to be pastors that are taking this class, but we need to understand that all three of these will eventually impact how you see yourself as a minister. Am I successful? And how do I define that success? Am I pandering to the people around me, trying to receive some sort of affirmation based upon their expectations of who I am, the positions I hold, and where I stand? Or am I feeling as though I don't even know if ministry in the 21st century even makes sense for me because I don't even know how to engage those that are different from me. Those three things in of themselves, whether you're going to be in a lead pastor role or you're going to be a church planter, or you're doing compassion ministries, whatever, could be the very things that begin to call into question whether or not you feel as though ministry is something you feel you should be engaged in. So I want to put that on I want to put that on our plate for us to think about as we move into this final lecture, which we're going to look at longevity and leadership, and we're going to deal specifically with one of Paul's letters to his protege Timothy. And I'm going to talk through just some of the different components that I think we need to be attentive to as we're thinking about the longevity of leadership and ministry.